Hey, what's going on, man? Welcome back. Today I'm talking about keyboard shortcuts. I hope you watched my previous free tutorials about gradient maps and color selection and color gradients and all this stuff. And today I'm talking about keyboard shortcuts because I feel like that's something super important that a lot of people don't even talk about. And it's something that can improve you immensely as an artist. You know, it can make you faster and it can just generally improve your workflow. And the reason for that is that when you're painting, you have one of your hands free, right? If you're painting with your right hand, you have your left hand free. So you need to go through all the keyboard shortcuts on the keyboard. And if you go ahead, if you have the standard keyboard shortcuts, they're all over the place. Like they're all over the keyboard. So you have to go from here to from one end to the other end. And it's not easy. So what I've done is I put all my keyboard shortcuts of all the things that I use in Photoshop. That's pretty much all the things that I use in Photoshop, like 95%. I've made them on the left side so I can press them really fucking easily and really super fast. So I wanted to go really fast over some of the things that I use in Photoshop, and hopefully it will help you, you know, hopefully it will help you and improve you. So the first thing that I do is I have brush and eraser. You know, that's something that every artist needs, and it's the standard. It's actually the B and E. You know, it's what normally Photoshop has. So what I'll do is when I usually paint, I'll just go back and forth between B and E. You see me constantly in live streams, in videos, whatever you've seen me paint, I just go in and I'll just do erase, brusher, eraser, brusher. And by the way, I'm gonna show you at the end of the video where you can download my keyboard shortcuts. So stay until the end and I'm gonna talk about that. So the first thing is brush eraser, and then I have brush size. And it's really something that a lot of people don't even talk about. And I feel like it's super important because the key to painting fast is really brush efficiency. And what that means is that how much can you paint with less strokes? You know, like you want to paint better and faster and use less strokes, because not only is that faster, but it also looks better. Because if you go in and you make a big brush stroke and then you go in with the smaller ones and you just keep doing that shit like chicken scratching, like you can see that one, the left one, looks way better because it just looks more natural. So the way to do that is brush efficiency, and the best way to get brush efficiency is by constantly changing your brush size. And normally I think the keyboard shortcuts for changing your brushes is the brackets, which are right here at the end of the keyboard. So what I've done is I've put them on the left side at A and F. And all my gamers out there are gonna understand because I've played League of Legends for a long time and I just love Q, W, E, R, and then I love A, S, D, and F. So those are all my main keyboard shortcuts. So I use A and F all the time, you know, to make my brushes smaller or bigger. And what I usually do is I'll make a brush stroke and then I'll be like, oh, it needs to be bigger and bigger. And every time I press and I make a brush stroke, I'll press F and I'll make it bigger, and the same goes for smaller. So it's something that I use all the time. So definitely if you haven't been changing your brush size, make sure that you do that. So the next thing I have is lasso tool. You know, again, something I use all the time. I've showed you if you watch my free video on how to use my brushes. It's a great technique I like to use, which is you press Z for lasso tool. You make a selection and then you go in with the airbrush and you're just pressing slightly, you know, gently, and you just go in, and then you have at one end you have a really hard edge, and then on the other you have a really soft one. So that's great anytime you're painting skin. You know, anytime I'm painting like a cheekbone, or like you may use it for hair, for anything, right? So if you have a hard edge, you just go in, you select it, and then you go in, you know, let's say you make more, you want to make it purple, you go in and look at that. That's a hard edge on one side and soft on the other. Oops, I'm gonna talk about that later. So then I have the rectangle, which is pretty much the same as lasso tool. If I want to make a selection, I just press W, and you know, you can go in with the airbrush. So after that, I have the smudge and the mixer brush. This is something I use all the time as well. It's really a great way to soften all your edges. Like, let's say, I've talked about this before, the importance of edges in paintings. You know, it's really edges that makes a great painting look the way it looks, you know, because the edges really make your eye just go from one point to the next. And if you look really closely, like you can notice right here is a soft edge, and right next to it, hold on, let me get a brush so I can show you. Right here is a soft edge, and there's like a really hard one, and there's a soft one on the opposite. And something that you always have to keep in mind is contrast. Not contrast only between colors, but contrast between edges, between everything, you know, between textures. So if you have a really rough texture right here, you want a really smooth one right next to it, right? And it's the same with edges. So anytime I paint a hard edge, I go in with the brick brush and I'll paint something really hard. I'll go right on the other side and I'll paint it a really soft one. And a great way to use a soft one is with the smudge tool. So you press D and you just go in and you just press gently. And what I've done, by the way, if you downloaded my 2 presets, I've set up some different smudges because you have to pick a brush for the smudge tool. So I have different ones like scratchy, smear, soft, all these different types. And my favorite one is the skin because it's not really like the round brush. Like the round just makes it softer, right? It doesn't add any texture, but the skin one just adds a little bit of texture, and it really looks ruffled. You know, it looks like, doesn't even look like skin. Like I use that texture for everything. So if you want to just add a quick soft edge, you just go in and you tap lightly, and look at that, just made a soft edge. Probably not the best place to put it, but it's a great tool. And then you have the mixer brush, which is N. So the same thing, you know, you have to pick a brush for the mixer brush, and I have paint, highlights, brick, and round. And it's really the way it works. You press Alt and then you pick an area, because it doesn't even work with colors, it works with an area. And if you want to go in, the way I painted this hair right here is I pressed Alt, you pick an area. You can see right here on the top, you picked an area, and you just go in and you lightly press, and what it does, it works like a normal brush, like a traditional brush, where you pick the paint and then you just smudge it. And it's a great way to paint hair, to paint all these types of materials, even to kind of render skin out. So a great combination is the smudge tool along with the mixer brush. So I just go in and I smoothen something out and I pull on, and it will just create great fucking effects. So definitely check out the mixer brush and the smudge. And then you just have the move tool, which is V, which is you just pick it and you just move the layer around. And by the way, a great fucking trick that I use all the time, if you have a lot of layers, right? If you have a lot of layers and you're not sure what layer this is on, and you're just like, oh, I wonder what this layer is on, what you do is you press the V tool, which is V, and then you press Control. So you press Control, you press on top of the layer that you want to find out, and boom, it magically brings you right to that layer. So you press Move tool, Control, you press, and it brings you to the layer. So it's really useful if you have a lot of layers and you're just like, man, I want to paint this eye, but I don't know which layer it is on. Press V, Control, bam, and you're just on that layer. So then we have some editing tools, hue, saturation, levels, and curves. And that's really something I use for editing. You know, if I want to improve the colors or the values, I just go in, Control Q. That's hue and saturation. You know, it's a great way to add saturation, to change the hue. Then you have the layers, the levels. You just make everything darker, lighter. Then you have the curves, which kind of work like the levels, but they are just different. You know what? This looks actually kind of better than the original. Shit. And then you have liquify. Liquify is Control, Shift, and X, and Alt. Control. Oh no, sorry. Hold on. It's Control, Shift, and X. I don't even know my own shortcuts. So you go into liquify, and it's something I use all the time just to kind of fuck with the proportions. So let's say I want this eyebrow to move it. Oops, sorry. You press W. You have to press this little hand right here for the warp tool. So I'll go in and I'll move the eyebrow to the top. I'll move the cheekbone. It's a great way to just kind of fuck around with the proportions. You know, if you want her to have a kind of like a bitchy face, you just improve. You just move her eyebrows and you just bring them down, and she's kind of like, what did you say? So that's a great tool, liquify. Then you have hide selection, inverse selection, which is if I'm making a selection with the lasso tool, and let's say you want to paint this area, and you're just kind of like, oh, okay, I want to paint this, but you're like, I don't want to look at the selection because it just kind of stands in the way, like I can't even see this edge. So what you do is you press Control Shift and D and it just hides it. So now it still has the selection, you're still painting in here, but you don't see it. And then another great thing is if you want to select this eye, but you want to paint everything but this eye, you press Control Shift Alt and D and it just inverses it. So now instead of painting into the eye, you can paint everywhere but the eye. Does that make sense? It's really useful. Selections, super fucking useful. And then you have my actions, which comes along with my brushes if you're signed for my Patreon, but I'm gonna talk about this in a second. Then you have my actions: duplicate layer, merge down, delete layer, and fire. So that's something I use really quick to merge down layers or to create new layers. So I press Shift and F2 and it just creates a new layer, because otherwise you have to go in here and press this, and when I'm painting I don't really have time for anything, so I'm just painting and I'm like, I need a new layer, so I'll just duplicate it, and I was just like, I need a new one, and I'll just duplicate the old one. So I'll create a new layer and I'll just duplicate it, right? So another thing is merging down. So I'm constantly, when I have a lot of layers, I just want to merge them down, so I press Shift and F3 and it just merges down everything, you know, super fucking useful. And I have Shift F4, which is delete layer, you know, because otherwise you have to go and double click. I don't have time for that shit. And then finally you have fire, which I covered on the gradient maps free tutorial, but it's something that I have a keyboard shortcut. So if you press Shift and F5, you know, it set up all these 3 layers that I talked about in the previous tutorial. You know, you set it up in here with the fiery shit, and then you just go white with white, and boom, you have fire. You have fire clouds. Boom. This is magic. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and you know, check out my Patreon. I don't know if you know about my Facebook group, but I have a Facebook group for artists, you know, where I talk about painting, I share advice, I do tutorials, I stream, I live stream every week, 2 times a week, 4 fucking hours. I talk shit, I talk about my life, I answer questions, I critique people's work, you know. It's an art community, you know. It's a community that I wish I had when I was starting out. So if you're interested in that, check out my Patreon, you know, there's the link below. Click the button, and I hope to see you in my fucking Patreon, man. Have a great time painting. I hope this helps. Peace.